Welcome to iAMradio broadcast number 20. Today I will be talking about get versus let. So what surrendered doing looks like. When you're just starting to get into the, oh wow, don't want to control everything game, it's a little confusing because surrender sounds like, I guess I'll just sit down and wait till everything happens for me. I guess I'll just sit down and wait. It's not quite that. So surrender, from my vantage point, is a state of mind that allows for you to act without attachment. And those are still kind of buzzy, so let's get in it more. So attachment is saying, this thing, I put my happiness, my whatever feelings in this thing. I am attached to this outcome. I need this relationship to be happy. I need this job. I need this amount of money. I need this hair color. I need these things to be happy. I am attached to this thing so that I feel some kind of way. If you've seen some of my other broadcasts, then this might be a little duplicate-ish, but if somebody had that same thing, they might feel completely different about it. And that's to say that feelings, this doesn't generate it. Your relationship to it does. Your ideas to it does. You can also see that if you have the same basket of items through time. Maybe you felt some type of way about it at the beginning and you felt some different type of way about it much later. So we get attached to these things. So much so, and remember, we're attached because we think this is our source of happiness, and we might perceive that happiness to actually be something like safety, and I'm not discounting physical safety, it's more like psychological safety. But even we could push on physical environments here too, but I feel happy because I am connected, love, blah, blah, blah. When you are attached to an outcome with your now, you're worried about your outcome that you're attached to in such a way that where you could or would be happy, you're not, because you're worried that you won't be later. So there's this sort of irony to a lot of our thinking that is counter to the result we're trying to generate. It's really cute when you get in there, but you might also see this. There's a book called Awareness by Anthony DeMello that I totally recommend. It blew my mind like 5 or 6 years ago. And he's like, so you want to be in a relationship so much that you would be unhappy to be in it. You're saying that you want to have this thing so much that you're willing to be miserable for it. And that's basically what we do to ourselves. We're like, I am going to make myself miserable until I'm not miserable when I have that. It's very silly. It's kind of like having a shoe. Maybe you went shopping before. Maybe you thought it would be a good idea to buy this one pair of shoes because they were kind of cute or you needed them for something. Every time you wear them, they hurt. They hurt every time. But you're attached to them. You want to keep them because they're cute, but they're non-functional. And there are a lot of things in our lives at a tangible level, so shoe and relationship, but also at an idea level. I need to be like this. If I'm not that, and we attach to these ideas. So when I started this conversation, I talked about attachment as far as outcome. Outcome is a later moment. Attachment is, I need that outcome, that later moment, those conditions in the later moment for my own happiness. And there was a word I just said too that I wanted to define as well. What was it? Oh man. Look, I forget. I guess it'll come to me. Okay, so I was talking about those outcomes, those conditions in a later time, and it doesn't have to be much later. It can be like, I need to be like that when I go there in 5 seconds. they're external, mostly. You can see them. But we also have attachment internal. I'm attached to being the funniest person in the room. I'm attached to being prettier than her. I'm attached to working the hardest. I'm attached to being sad. I'm attached to being the black sheep. We attach to these things, and some of them we don't even want to be, but they're familiar and we want to stay to the story, and so we kind of preserve it at our own expense because we'd rather be attached to something in some ways than to be free to feel however we feel now. Why is this so uncomfortable at a psychological level? I think iAMradio is because then you see like who you really are, which is a lot of my messaging, just this aspect of divinity. When we're thinking about ourselves and our human experience, when they talk about the Matrix, this is what the Matrix means to me. Sometimes I think there are probably other ones. It's this box stuffed full of ideas, and ideas about how to get from here to here, what you can say to her or not say to her, what you have to be able to be accepted. It's like all of these ideas, and the ideas prevent free action because we're trying to stay like safe. It's almost like in Mission Impossible where they have little red lasers and he's squiggling through them. We have all of these ideas about what needs to be for this, how this should be, what that should look like, and we're trying to like squiggle our lives through it. And my point is, the red lasers aren't weaponized. They're imaginary. And a lot of the things you might hear from motivational speakers is like, fear's not real. And that's another concept that, like, surrender can be, it's contextual. So when you're talking about surrender and you're talking about fear, someone could say like, well, you should be afraid if that's a big dog. Yeah, you should be afraid if that's a big dog. It's not this blanket statement of like, run in front of trains, although I do think at certain levels of identification, yogis do it, other people have done it. You can't transcend physical reality. You can like be invisible through the train. I'm not advocating that at all. I'm just saying I do think at some point, or in some ways in other places, that's happening. My point is that fear in time and space, so not present to right now, is based on what you think might happen. So many of your assumptions, unfortunately, are based on fear. Like, they're thoughts that your brain is your survival buddy, sort of, until it screws you over. But the survival buddy is like, hey, I have this list of all the stuff that's never worked, and I added things I heard other people said and things I saw on TV, so don't worry, I'll consult all of this before you make any moves. So when you're thinking forward and you're worried about something, you're using stuff that's imaginary. You actually don't know. And you can get all types of lost in your imagination and really buy into and start to think through, how will I avoid this thing is going to happen? Well, you don't know. You only think it is. And there might be things that are very physical. Well, the bill is due on this date. The court hearing is on this date. Like, things that are very physical. I've been coaching people for some time. If you make space in your head for things to be different, often when you get to the red laser, it changes. And to make space for things to be different in your head means allow just a little question mark after what you think is going to happen. So when you're really in that story and you think, how do I avoid this monster? Just remember, at this point where you're standing right now, you only think there will be a monster. You're only imagining a monster. And when you do that, you You create it in some ways, but you also do the thing I was talking about earlier where you're so concerned about later circumstances that you're like, fuck the now. Let me be miserable now so that I can not be miserable later. Even though being miserable now doesn't actually address later. It takes you out of your higher level thinking. It puts your body under stress. It kind of closes you off to the information that's available for you to be creative and screws you over. And unfortunately, and screws you over is a kind of rough term, but unfortunately, it's sort of normalized in our world that it's like, well, if you're not worried, you don't care. You're not stressed. You're not busy. Are you lazy? No. You're just aware that putting yourself in that psychological state or allowing yourself to be in that psychological state doesn't do anything. It doesn't. You can worry till your pants fall off. It doesn't do anything. If you can bring your physiology to a calm state, then you can actually think through and constructively address something that you're worried about. But if you're all caught up in your like fight or flight, you're pretty useless. So one thing, when you start to notice that this happens and that you have the choice not to go there, the first step, and this is probably consistent across all my work as well, the first step is to accept that you're there. Don't be mad or sad about it. If you're driving the worry bus and you're bringing everybody, get on. Hey guys, we're gonna go worry about something that's not real yet. And you're leading the charge there, and you notice, you're like, oh shit, here I am again. Oh man. Don't be mean to you about it. Be nice to you about it. Maybe make a joke. Maybe use the same thing like, oh, I see you're driving the worry bus again. Why don't we get off? And bring yourself to a state of just like, okay, I'm gonna breathe and relax till I'm here. Breathe and relax until I'm here. And one way to support you in doing that is to allow for you to kind of like really brain dump. So I'm thinking about making rhymes and I'm thinking about making like funny lyrics for people to remember some of these strategies, and I'll have to remember the brain for this one. This is a good move to use. Thanks, Peter, nice to see you. So you can dump your brain onto paper and say like, all right, that thing that I'm worried about, that I'm just circling in my head, I'll notice I'm driving the worry bus and the worry bus doesn't go anywhere good. I'll calm myself. I'll accept that I'm on the worry bus. I'll make a joke about being on the worry bus. I'll get off the worry bus. I'll allow myself to write down all the facts that I have, all the things I can do anything with. I'm going to breathe myself to here. And then later, when you're feeling really good, sit down with your list and say like, okay, let's see if I can constructively come up with something. Earl Nightingale is a mid-20th century self-development guy. He's like one of the fathers. And he has some work that it's a little outdated, but there are so many gems in it. And I think he has one called Lead the Field that talks about how to do like thinking proactively. And it's good. It's good. Like how to generate problem-solving ideas. And maybe some people that will be easier for than others, but it does seem like if you open to a solution rather than sing the song of how there isn't one, you're more likely to connect with it. So, okay. I had to fill it up before. All right, so I started this out by saying how get versus let, and what is surrendered action or surrendered doing. And what I was just talking about is get thinking. So it's like, I have to get this outcome. I have to control all of these people and things to make sure that I get the job, or they pick up my call, or, this happens or this doesn't happen. And it takes you out of where you are and puts you in an imaginary place, usually in a disempowered way, and that would be trying to get an outcome. That would be outcome attachment. You can notice you're doing that when you look around, you do your 360 and you're like, oh, no fires, no zombies, like pretty good. And if you're still in an emotionally agitated or mentally agitated state, you're likely worried about some kind of later outcome. You think, so another way to talk about outcomes is, when I'm teaching this to clients, sometimes I use the example of Uber Eats. So let's say you saw, the first time you ordered Uber Eats, it was a black car like this that delivered it. You then associate food with the black car, this black car. Let's say the next time that you order it, you're peering out your window for that car, not realizing that it could come on a bicycle or in a red car. But you're like, where's the black car? I need to find the black car. Is the black car gonna make it? Look, there are a bunch of different ways for you to get that. There are a bunch of different ways for love, for money, for vitality. There are a lot of different ways for you to get what you ordered if you drop the idea that it can only come from this one place. And a lot of our culture too is very heavily invested in, like, I guess it's meaning or specialness, where it's like, well, that was my first black car. That's the only black car. That was my first Uber Eats. That was the only one. It's like, okay, you can hold on to that story. You can be attached to that idea that it needs to be that way and make yourself miserable. Or you can let go, which is the second part of this, and let it be whatever it is. Whoever delivers it, it could be a walk-up. Whoever delivers it is who delivers it. And that's what non-attachment is, where it's like, I made the order, I'm doing the things, maybe it'll come from that. Another example of that that's tangible is I work with people when they're changing careers or changing jobs, and they might come at it in a way that they think that they have to do, like, the LinkedIn printout, where it's like, okay, well, I update my resume, I do these things, and then I'll get a job. Well, you can definitely do those things, but if you're only focused on that way, then you'll pigeonhole yourself off from other opportunities. Maybe if you were a little bit more open-minded and you weren't fixated on the one track, the one outcome, you weren't attached to that one car, maybe you have a phone call with an old friend and they're talking about what they're doing at work, but you're not really paying attention because you're worried about how you're going to get your job later. So it's that kind of thing where it's very ironic, but you leave here where things are to try to think where they will be later. So in that example, the person could go through the steps of updating their profile on LinkedIn, doing all that stuff. But and the surrender doing there would be, it could come from anywhere, and it might look different than I thought. It might come on a scooter. That to me is what surrendered action is. It does not mean that you just wait. It just means that you are not attached to an outcome, which then opens the field or the door for you to achieve or receive what you're looking to do without making yourself miserable now. And I think that's the most succinct way I've ever explained it. I might be done now. Does anyone have any questions or examples? When I was working through this for myself, it's taken, I had some shit and I had some layers, and it took me a while to sort through the things that I was attached to. I talk about gene keys a lot in my work, and human design. They're great know yourself tools. Myself has the gene key around expectation, and that's basically to say the outcomes, all about the outcomes. So this was a big area for me to work through. An example of this too would be, let's say that you mess up a relationship and it ends, and then you think it's like you think you miss your train, you think these things, and you attach to you make yourself miserable now because you think that the outcome is behind you. And that could be around any decision you've ever made or anything that's ever happened. You're attached to an outcome through a specific vehicle in such a way that you close and shut yourself off to living. It's the silliest thing, but it just happens. And you're like, it could be years before you pick up your head and be like, oh, like, I guess this is my new ground. Yes, did you want me to pick up the mic you just dropped? Boo. Oh, girl, I love you. Thanks for coming. So, going back to let. I do find, and this is, I'm just kind of coming out of the magical closet and saying, like, in addition to all these, calculations I can do and science I can cite and all this stuff, there's this component of our experience that is really magical and transcends logic. Nobody actually really knows what's happening, but you can pick up on patterns of things, and it seems like, at least for me, what I intend and focus on does make a difference. And more importantly are the beliefs that I'm looking through toward that. So like I said, I had a lot of work to do, and some of the beliefs I looked at, if you saw, I put out a paper the other day on how humans have operating systems, how we're programmed. One of my programs that was so close to my face I couldn't see it was like, this has to be really hard so you can say how hard it was and how you suffered so that you're special. So I'm looking out at everything, making it way harder than it needed to be so that I could stay consistent with that. I was attached to that identity. I was attached to that idea about who I was, about what was important. There are a lot of things that you can get very easily and be very easily. When I'm working with people too, another thing that stands out, what's most miraculous about them, the thing that is their unique genius, what they do naturally, is generally so easy and natural for them, they can't even see how special it is. I was on a podcast a couple years ago with Roy Edwards, no relation, and I don't know if he rebranded it, but it was called the End of Our Podcast. And after it, he told me this story about Jesus I thought was so cool. He's like, yeah, Jesus was hanging out with his friends, and there was a crowd of people, and I'm kind of riffing on it, but he's like, Jesus was doing these miracles, and the crowd was looking to his friends and saying, wow, did you see that? Look at those miracles. And his friends were like, oh, it's just Jesus being Jesus. And that really is how it is for us as individuals. Whatever is the most, the coolest, most unique thing you do, you likely don't see it because you've been doing it always. And if you need help finding that, just ask people around you, like, hey, what would you say that I'm really good at? Or even just be honest with yourself. Where do you go naturally? Where do you have the most fun? What lights you up? Generally, what lights you up is what's easy for you, which is your gift. Well, it's all the same thing. How cool it all comes together. Why did I run off on that? I was talking about, the beliefs. So, thank you. When you're looking out at, I was talking about leveraging the non-physical component. So as part of organizing your mind, do all these things, make it happen, there's let. And I talked about let being part of non-attachment, where you don't need it to be, you don't need your Uber Eats to come delivered from that car. You let it come however it comes, you're surrendered. That is surrendered action. When you're, let's say, identifying targets or things that you want to allow, grow, nurture, or get. What I was talking about before I ran off on the Jesus story was you look at what to do, even on your inside, through your beliefs. And your beliefs could make everything really hard. If you have a belief, like I did, that you need to suffer to be special, if it comes easy, you don't earn it, then you're going to make everything hard. Everything hard. I could have a marker here and a marker over there, and I'm gonna go get that marker, so I have the story about how hard it was for me to get the marker to write. I could use this marker, but it wouldn't be consistent with my beliefs. So it's either filtered out of my experience, or I'll come up with a story about why this marker won't work. Hey Randy, welcome. And so that's to say that while you're okay, you're saying like, do I want to go we're talking about get versus let, surrender, doing. Let is allowing yourself to consider what beliefs you're looking through that might complicate or make what's happening more challenging. Beliefs you might have too are, I don't deserve this, it'll never work, it's not possible. They might even be a little bit twisty, so it might be, I mess up everything I have, and so you hold things apart so that you don't get them to mess them up. There are so many crazy ways that our operating system gets these ideas, these beliefs, that make shit so hard. What's so crazy about beliefs, like here, it's a really basic one. Let's say that when you're a kid, you're out in the yard and they have one of those summer sprinklers, so you're just kind of running through the sprinkler and you fall and you're embarrassed. You might spend the rest of your life saying, I can't walk in grass, and that's like exaggerated, but we do that with sharing our emotions, letting people close to us, communicating honestly, asking for what we want. There was maybe one incident or a period of time where something didn't work and it hurt. And so we spend the rest of our life living out of that belief. When something hurts or you don't see something that's not that, it really registers and you live as if it was true. So I think in that paper I'm referencing, it's posted on my Instagram, it's also on my Quora and Medium, and you can get to those through the links in my link tree on my profile. I talk about how what you can do if you're not living fully is allow yourself to do like the 360. Again, 360 is really like the power move. So you look around and you own it all. No matter what the fuck is happening in your world, who the fuck is doing what, you own it all. You say, this is my life, my experience. And then you ask, no, I don't care. I don't care what they're doing. No. In this exercise, you own it all. And, of course, going back to the fear idea, there would be like, this is not saying like, hey, like stay with domestic violence. It's not that. Although in some ways that also speaks to this, where it's, what do I believe to be true? Or what must I believe to be true? Or what must I think about myself that I allow for or participate in this experience, or that it's part of my world? From what I can tell, there is no absolute program. There is no absolute reality. Shit, not only is it always moving, but it's subjective, it's relative. I think it's it's quantum, it's both at once. There is no way it is. It can't be said. I talk about this a lot in my work as well. You have science very well-meaningly with its little magnifying glass, and philosophy and spirituality and all these things with their little, magnifying glass, saying this is why this, not realizing this is all part of this. It's all one thing. You can't see yourself. You're part of what you're looking at. You're looking at that thing, asking those questions with what you're looking at, with what you're asking. It's nuts. Just to say, you can't know shit here. You can't know shit. And a lot of people I found who are sensitive or maybe intelligent, and when I talk about intelligence, my mom's she's my proofreader on my websites and stuff, and I used to try to specify, I work with really intelligent people who are it's stuck in their heads, and she's like, well, Shay, most people wouldn't say they're really intelligent. And it's true, they wouldn't. And yet they are. Intelligence is natural. intellect is developed, and intellect is generally the enemy of intelligence. Intellect is the part of you that says like, oh, it can't be because of all these files, all these ways. Well, shit, all the ways, all like it hasn't all been written. So intellect is often confines intelligence, which would just otherwise go and do it. So I think you see that too with entrepreneurs or people who didn't finish high school or college. They don't know what they can't do, so they do it. And there is, from what I can tell, this incredible intelligence and wisdom to our individual being, our individual selves, and our uniqueness, that if you just stay out of its way, it does stuff. It heals itself. Think of all the things, and I get really excited about this every time I touch it in a story, or in a live, so I'll try not to go too far on it, but just for a second, think how incredible your body is, like what it's doing all the time, what the ecosystem is doing, this is a miracle. Whatever is happening is insane. And the part that we can actually conceptualize and speak to in language is so small. It's so small. And yet we walk around with this thing trying to it's wild. It's wild. My point is that my point was, when I was going towards the intelligence, I forget where I started that chain, but I was gonna say about how, I guess something around how, dropped it. I dropped it. I was running so fast, I dropped it. Please forgive me, and if you remember where I started that, do holler. All right, that's all I want to talk about today. So, in summary, I was presenting surrender doing, so how to act in surrendering. And thanks, Peter. It was something before that. I went there because of intelligence, but I'm not sure why. I can't remember why. So and this is in a lot of, I think, Buddhist and Hindu, I guess you'd call it literature. I don't know, they say it. It's in me. It's in images on the internet. It's like, don't, let go and surrender, non-attachment. And what I was talking about today is non-attachment is when you think that how you feel is a result of a set of conditions. Conditions can be external things. I need this person to behave this way. I need this much money. I need my hair to look like this. I need this person to be president. Those are conditions externally. And you also have internal conditions, which are ideas. I need to be this way. They need to, I need to be this way. I am this. I have to stay consistent with that. This is what's most important. You attach to these ideas, and because you attach to them, you make yourself miserable now for then. You think that you need those to be happy. And so here, right now, where you could be happy, except for that, you could be happy if you didn't know you needed them, you're not. Because you think you need to get them. So you'll take what you have, your moment, your now, your power, and you'll leave it in worry, or you'll leave it in self-damnation, or you'll leave it in some kind of story or explanation so that you can have an outcome, a set of conditions later, or hit targets that you think you should, so that then you can be happy. And I talked about how that state that you put yourself in when you're attached to outcomes like that, it's more than being unhappy now. What you do actually, neurologically, is psychologically, you make yourself less available to you make your higher level thinking less available to you. So if you actually were interested in generating a specific outcome in fight or flight, you're not going to be able to do that level of thinking. You can't. Physiologically, you're just not at your peak then. So it takes kind of takes balls to be like, I'm going to be happy. I see the ship is sinking. I see this is happening, and I'm going to be here because in this state, I'm most functional. Also, at a physiological level, what happens to your body under stress, I don't think is like what anybody is trying to do. And all I'm saying here is, so that is what attachment to outcomes is, where you think you need things to be a certain way so that you feel some type of way, and you recognize you made that up or you were taught it, and if you wanted, you could feel that way without it, which then frees you to pursue it or allow it in a way that's more sustainable, holistic, and generally more effective. You can also open the door to let things be easier by considering what beliefs you might have that could make it hard for you. So a lot of the ways that we are taught to think of ourselves are with film and television. A lot of those have like, I'm the primary character. I'm really sad because my dog died, so I'm gonna kill all the other dogs. And like, it's not as sad, it's not portrayed as sad when those other ones go, because you're looking through the protagonist's eyes. So you are trained to think in this way that like you're the main character, and it's like you're basically what you want or what you're doing is most important. And that type of thinking, those would be beliefs that you look through, they can make you miserable, because a lot of the time you have to ignore information and to like let that even be possible in your head. It's like your idea is like, oh, I need to be this way. And so I will filter, your subconscious will do it for you. I will filter information that doesn't let that be true for me. And then when you're making choices, when you're responding to people, you're not responding to the information that's here. You're in your own little like hero journey, and like been there, done that. So no judgment. It's just be mindful of where you think you're going, and have you aggrandized it in a way that is counterproductive. A lot of thinking is just counterproductive. I used the example of Uber Eats to explain how attachment you can become, when you want something, generally you only think you want it, and you think you want it because you think it will make you feel some type of way. So that's also where Buddhist philosophy and the Hindus are like, don't want, because wanting makes you miserable. It can, if you're putting, again, your feelings, you're in those later things. But let's say that you wanted an opportunity to grow. And again, you might order your opportunity. I know this is what I want. And if you focus it on one job, I need to get them to answer. I need to get that position. You think about it as if that's the only car that can deliver what you want. It could come from a bunch of different places, a bunch of different ways, if you allow yourself to be more open-minded and not attached to that thing. So that is what attachment is to me. And so that would be like trying to get through attachment or get for attachment. And letting is basically saying, I can be as happy right now as I want, which is true later. And happiness might not be the best metric. It might be peace, because sometimes you can have waves of emotion that don't feel like happiness, but you can be at peace with them. You might be attached to the idea that you should be happy all the time. And so when you're naturally moving through emotions that are heavier and you're not happy, you think that it's wrong. And so you take how you're kind of feeling bad and you magnify it, and that's suffering. What you do when you say right now how I feel and what's happening should be different than it is, that's suffering. And you can squash suffering at any given time by saying like, I accept this must be perfect. If this is where we are, this must be perfect. And going back to like that, does surrender mean I just sit still and wait? Does acceptance mean you just like, it's been so long since I pretended to smoke something, but does acceptance mean you just sit back and wait. No, it means like you don't have ideas that this should be different. That does not mean you don't work for it to be better. Acceptance is saying like, the house is really messy. Okay. I'm going to clean it. Okay. Non-acceptance is like, I can't believe the house is is dirty. I'm so mad. This is so sad. I'm terrible. None of that helps. None of that does anything. Acceptance is saying like, well, here we are. And you move with it from there. You don't resist it. And that's another way to leverage let, where you let it move because you're not busy wasting energy resisting it. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I would love feedback here or later about the level that I'm talking to things on. Is it accessible? Are you, where are you at relative to it? Is it helpful? Like, what up? I really appreciate you guys coming out. So all of the iAMradio so far, they are on my IGTV. Some of them are on my IG profile, and some are just available on the triangle, the middle icon above the profile grid. And all of them are on youtube.com/The Shaylee Show. Thanks. I didn't know you were in there. Thanks. Hey. And I'm offering an awarenessing workshop right now. And it's kind of cute because it's flexi, because I do work with parents and y'all have like lots of demands on your time and your attention. And so it's flexi in that you can do it by yourself, or if you want to do it with your friends, you can. And what I'm teaching in that is how to accept yourself, like to love who you are. And so you can teach your kids to do that through your modeling of it. And acceptance, again, it's not saying like, oh, I'll never get better or faster. Acceptance is saying like, I can keep getting better and faster, but right now I'm going to love me. And again, when you say yes to what is, when you accept or you're not attached and you're allowing yourself to be in a safe, pleasant mental state, you're so much more effective. And I think this is particularly important for parents because from what I've seen, they have so much pressure to be this kind or that, or am I doing it right, or this or that. And they're so caught up in those that it's challenging for them to relax enough to be with what is. And so my goal here is really just to allow them to enjoy themselves and to enjoy their kids. So that workshop is on my website. And I also have my new divination deck for sale I'm pretty excited about. I designed all of these and they're coming. I redesigned a couple, but they'll come with a notebook to help you tune into your own patterns of change. So going back to self-acceptance, you likely, and I think I talked about this in my last video, you likely are measuring yourself against this idea of who you think you should be, which again is the same as non-acceptance, which is the same as attachment. You're attached to this idea of who you could be or should be, that you're not actually with who you are. And so each person, from what I found, we all work differently. So if you might have a cycle, and this is true for I see this with creative people, innovative people, where they're just fucking low. They're just down. And if they think that they should be a different way, they're not able to like soak out what's there in that time or like wring out what's there in that time because they're trying to troubleshoot it or think they should be different or better. So they're in non-acceptance of their natural state, which generally makes it worse and generally makes it longer. And so what I want to do with the stuff that goes with this deck is help people to learn how they change, how they grow, what their patterns of life are like, so that when they're high or when they're low, they're not thinking, oh, I should be here or I could be there. Oh, no, you are. Where you are is where you are. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for coming out and for contributing. Thank you for those comments, guys. I'm glad that it relates and makes sense. All right, have an awesome weekend.